Let's get started. I'm going to share my screen, and we are going straight in Business Central because this is a training webinar. So no sales, no sales pitch, no advertising, no lengthy intro or housekeeping. Let's get started. So I'm sharing my screen. Today we will be using version 27 of Dynamics 365 Business Central, which is being deployed in this region, EMEA and the US, as we speak. So if you're using a sandbox, if you're already using Business Central, chances are you're either on version 26.5 and your environment will be updated maybe even between today, tomorrow. Worst case scenario is going to be throughout the first 2 weeks of November. If you have access to a demo sandbox, you might have, of course, the opportunity to create your sandbox in preview. This is a stable version that I created ahead of this webinar. You can see I just created a manufacturing demo company. I will use this company also in a couple of weeks because we will have more training webinars on manufacturing, inventory costing, purchase planning, advanced warehousing, sales and CRM. Every couple of weeks, maybe 3 weeks, I plan to give a new webinar. So before we get started with the first topic on the agenda, a bit about me. My name is Alfredo. I am a Microsoft certified trainer and consultant. I've been doing this for about 12 years. Before that, I used to do a lot of supply chain management as also as independent supply chain management consultant. Today, I run my 365 training company called D365 Training, Dynamics 365, and I help organizations, both end users and partners, upskill their team and make the most of the application that they use in the workplace by giving bespoke advanced training for these applications. Today, we're going to learn about the general ledger, the Business Central. So let's get started. The structure of the general ledger and how it ties to the sub-ledgers. This is something very important that we often miss, because if we look at Business Central and we're trying to find the general ledger, we don't really find it. We have the general ledger set up, we have the general ledger entries, which is essentially an archive. And it's an archive because every transaction that affects the general ledger gets into this general ledger entry. Now, keep in mind that you might, like some consultants or some users might think that this ledger is something that you can put into a Power BI or into an Excel and run your analysis. Think again, because this is just a flat register or everything that happens to your ledger. And in this company, I have a few thousands entries. It's very easy to go live with Business Central and a few months later end up with hundreds of thousands of millions. I believe my last client has something like 12 million entries in the general ledger. So this is not an issue. Business Central can manage that. That means that for your financial reporting should not really point to the general ledger. There are much better ways to get the data out of your system. So the general ledger essentially is something that runs in the background, and we don't really see it, and we don't have to. The most obvious place to see how the general ledger works is to look at the chart of accounts, which is something that, of course, is the backbone of the financial data of every organization. Everything that happens in Business Central with regards to the general ledger will eventually show here. So this is where we need to look at our data. The net change, the balance, every value, every number that shows here is the result of the sum net change and balance of transactions that happen in the general ledger. And now you can see I am looking at the same page, but I'm looking at only this account. So this is how the system keeps everything in order. The general ledger is something that exists, it always works, but we don't really need to see it. The structure of our general ledger is very simple in Business Central. It only really looks at the general ledger codes. In this case, it's the chart of accounts, it's the number. And if we look in, let's say, a sneak peek into Business Central, in the back end, you can see the page inspection tool clearly shows that even though the page is called a chart of accounts, we are really looking at a page that feeds from the general ledger account. And so there is one entry for each general ledger account number. In some countries, and depending on how you work or you live or you studied, this is often also called a nominal ledger. So nominal ledger, general ledger account is pretty much the same thing. It's the code that, or the codes that make your company's chart of accounts. In very simple terms, really, that's it. That is all about the general ledger. So everything else that happens, debit and credit, direct posting, foreign currencies, adjustments, right? The link between some ledgers and the general ledgers happens in business through other pages and other details here. For example, you can see here that we have raw materials and we have account subcategory. If I drill down into the general ledger code, you can see that the account category is an option. And in this case, it's an asset. And here, Business Central gives me only the 6 main options for an account category that are pretty much standard across every country. Asset, liability, and equity, income, cost of goods sold, and expense. Divided between the balance sheet and income statement. This is basic, simple accounting rules that, of course, Business Central also enforces. I cannot create new categories. I can only choose between the 6. And like I cannot create a third option in addition to income statement or balance sheet. Again, this is accounting tools and terminology. I can, however, create an account subcategory. And even these should really be pretty much standardized. So here now we're looking at a page called General Ledger Account Categories, even though the name is misleading because it's not really a category, it's a subcategory. So something we need to learn when we start using Business Central. And here you can see the link, like the architecture, so to speak, the structure of how general ledger codes, general ledger accounts, like your nominal ledgers, are linked to the categories. And it's essentially one category, many general ledgers. And so this is also an opportunity to simplify your chart of accounts, for example, right? To see maybe and to streamline your financial reports, something we'll see in a moment. Because the key is here, report definition. We will see that in a moment. So you can see we have the main category, which is an asset. Underneath, we have 2 child categories, which is current assets and fixed assets. And under current assets, we have another level, and this is entirely up to you. We have cash, accounts receivable, prepaid expenses, inventory. I strongly encourage you to use these categories as you set up your chart of accounts, because it's pretty much standard, all done for you. Can you create new categories? Of course you can, right? We can always find the general ledger accounts categories here as a separate list page. And now here you can see everything. It is a good place to look at how my, like my company data without using spreadsheets or creating custom reports, because you can see it's pretty much done for you. So if you can use this list, and in most of my projects, this list is pretty much okay, because it's based on standard accounting principles, right, and conventions. But of course, nothing stops me from editing the list and now create a new category. Sometimes fixed assets, right, equipment, you can see, and accumulated depreciation is limited. So fixed assets, you might have another subcategory, right? They might look at, other details, although we have subcategories also for fixed assets. But again, your organization, your client might have specific requirements. And so you might have, the option to see, for example, under income, something more diverse here, cost of goods sold. You might have your expenses. And here you can see that in the accounts, there are in this list, which you can see, general ledger accounts list. This is how you do it. You can, in fact, create new general ledgers in your chart of accounts and tag them with a category, or you can create a category and then tell Business Central they'll actually, in payroll expenses, right? I want to look at payrolls. At the moment, I don't have payrolls. Let me see if it's personnel, for example. And then, I might actually have to, to find the actual pay slips here and, bonuses, overtime. There we go. Salaries and hourly wages and overtime wages. There we go. Commissions, PTO accrued. There we go. And so now all these 4 or 5 general ledgers codes now are under payroll expenses. Okay, which you might see there are different the benefits expenses and so on. So now that I have updated my general ledger categorization, you might have seen that Business Central now is telling me, it's giving me a sort of a warning. It's not really a warning, it's a notification, right? And it's very easy to miss, unfortunately, because it's very small and it uses a background color, which is pretty much follows the same color combination of Business Central. So it's very easy to miss this notification. But I got a notification. The notification is telling me that I have changed one or more general ledger account categories that financial reports use. We will see those in a moment. Since I have changed the categorization, the system is now telling me what to do. Well, it just tells me that we recommend that you update the financial reports when you change it by choosing Generate Financial Reports. And this financial reports, if I click here, the system will do it for me. It tells me to keep existing financial reports with their row definition and create new ones. But I don't really want to. I want to overwrite existing financial reports because I don't want to create multiple versions of my income statement reports, right? I don't want to create 3 or 4 balance sheet versions of my, again, 3 or 4 different reports for balance sheet, for example, my balance sheet, where I don't see certain ledgers in one, but I see only in the other. So I try to keep everything consistent. And now this system has updated my financial reports. I can also go here and say, just do it once again. More about these financial reports in a moment. So we have the chart of accounts, which is made of general ledger codes. We have the general ledger entries that are created automatically by the system every time I post something. And of course, the sum goes here. So categorization, chart of accounts. And so in this case, it's pretty much simple. So what happens though, in a system like Business Central, when we don't want to use our general ledgers for transactions? We don't just want to post journals. We want to use sales, documents. We want to use purchase documents. And maybe, and this is exactly why I'm here, maybe we want to use inventory. We want to purchase physical items. We want to ship physical items. Well, in that case, every time we transact, we must have a link between the actual customers, vendors, if it's purchases, and items, so that Business Central can update the general ledger automatically. Those links, the logic behind it is in the link between the general ledger and the subledgers. And these are called posting groups, which is the topic of our next again section. So let's start with customers, which is more easier to understand. Here I have a bunch of customers, and if I open one, I will see that in this page there is a dedicated section of the called invoicing. Let me close the fact box so we can see how it works. And here I have the posting groups. Now this is a US sandbox, so I see only 2 posting groups. In an EU localization, I will have the third one, which is the VAT posting group for value-added tax, which is used in Europe, in the EMEA region. In most countries in that region use VAT. In the US and the other regions, we have sales tax. But again, we're not going to talk about tax today. The principle is the same, so we don't have to worry too much about not covering the tax posting group. Bear with me, because in a moment it will all make sense. So posting details of this customer shows business posting group domestic and customer posting group also domestic. Now keep in mind, and I want to say this now, but I will say it very often, and when I do my training, when I train consultants and I train users, I often say this, and I say it all the time, to the point where sometimes you might be tired of listening to this, but it's so critical, it's so important that I want you to do it, and I want to say it over and over and over again. The data that you have in a Kronos company like this one, which is all test data that we can use to learn the new system, right? It's really all sales data, or demo data, demo. It doesn't mean that it has to be like this. When you set up your organization, your client company, you don't need to follow this structure. Look at this one: domestic, EU, and export. In a US sandbox, there's no need to have customers and vendors in EU, other customers and vendors in non-EU. So this is often a mix of data, demo data, that comes from different places, different companies. In some cases, the data that you will find in Kronos is plain wrong. And we don't need to, we must not use it, right? So, having said that, let's see at how it works, and hopefully I will be able to explain to you why this is wrong. So, 2 types of posting groups. If you are starting from the MB800, the official Microsoft certification, these groups are divided into specific and general groups. Specific, in this case, is customer. Specific posting groups are customer posting groups, vendor posting groups, inventory posting groups, and so on. General posting groups are general business posting group, general product posting groups, and so on. The 2 different families of groups do something very different. So let's look at this domestic general business posting group, which again, I encourage you not to follow the terminology domestic, EU, and export, because it doesn't make too much sense most of the time, and sometimes again it's plain wrong. But let's say, for whatever reason you want to follow this logic, the general business posting group domestic, it's now applied to this customer. If I look at the setup called general posting setup now tells me that when I sell to customers that are set up with this group, and I use a product and I sell to them a product, keep in mind this doesn't have to be an inventory item. So product posting group may actually be misleading. It's not a physical product. Non-inventory items, general ledgers on an invoice will follow the same logic, and you will have the general product posting group or non-inventory transaction. So the general product posting group and the general business posting group, so who we sell to, what we sell to them, will determine now the general ledgers, and these are my general ledgers, right? These are my nominal ledgers, right, or my chart of accounts. So the posting setup really creates that link. And so the challenge we have here is that unlike what happens with the specific posting groups, when you have customers for customers and sales, and vendor posting groups for vendors and purchases, and inventory posting groups for items, here we don't have a differentiation. We don't have a separate groups for sales and purchases. Therefore, if I look at this page here, I can see that the first part is about sales. So this posting group now works on customers, sales account for a sales invoice, sales credit memo for a sales credit memo, sales line discounts if I apply a line discount on my invoice, right? Sales invoice discount if I want to apply a bulk discount for my customer, sales prepayment, credit and debit, and so on. So the first few columns are really about the sales. And now you can see, as I move to the right, I see purchases. So the purchases side of it, of course, it doesn't work on domestic customers, but it works on domestic vendors, because now if I look at a vendor card and I open a vendor and I open a page, now if I scroll down, I will find the equivalent, the invoicing equivalent for my vendor, and guess what? We find the same general business posting group. So this is a critical and essential element of business or the general ledgers or the general ledger architecture, so to speak, in Business Central, where the general business posting group, the same code is applied to both vendors and customers. And therefore, the limitation about domestic and EU might not really apply, because this is really about how your organization or your clients, if you work in consulting like me, categorize their sales. It's got nothing to do with the fact that a customer might be domestic, EU, or export, unless you really need to see sales for US customers to go in one general ledger, and sales to EU customers to go in another ledger, and sales to other customers not in EU to go to a third ledger. So if you are in the EU, your question might be, well, actually, I do need to categorize those sales, but not for revenues, but for taxes. Good. We can use another posting group, not the business posting group for tax purposes. So really, most of the times, if you work with a small or medium enterprise, the sales must be categorized based on what they sell, not on who they sell to, for revenue purposes. So it's perfectly fine to have one default business posting group to apply to everybody, to every customers. And then we can use the differentiation of product posting groups. And if you want to create something more sophisticated, we can use dimensions, because the same customers might be categorized in a different way based on other characteristics. So not just where the customer is based, not a fixed one-to-one, right, domestic customer, but a one-to-many, maybe based on the customer ship-to address. And so you have domestic, you have area. Based on a ship-to code, we have a dimension. Again, more about that later, because it gets more complex. But hopefully you will see how the link between the two works. So if the generic or the general posting group looks like revenue for customers, purchases and expense for vendors, and more about inventory when we buy inventory, cost of goods sold when we ship and sell inventory, what is the specific posting group? What does that do? Well, the customers posting group, the vendor posting groups are really about your subledger. This is where the link between the subsidiary ledger and the general ledger start working. Because the customer posting group now, which you also see, you can see the same domestic EU and foreign. And in this case, really, it makes even less sense to have the kind of differentiation, because you can see now, if I look from here, you will see that now the customer posting group is not even a combination of a tag categorization on the customer and an item. It's just the customer, and it's primarily about the sales subledger. A sales subledger, and it's an invoice, payments, credit memos, and then we have the accounts receivable account. A payment discount. Why is the payment discount here? Because it's about application of the payment. Right? It's not really about the income statement, unless, of course, we're talking about where the rounding, therefore the profit and loss of my payment goes. But if you think about it, the profit and loss accounts that I need to use when I apply a payment for a customer invoice does not depend on the item on the invoice, does it? A payment discount for a customer, maybe in a foreign currency, right, does not depend on what it's on the invoice. It's all about the sales subsidiary ledger, right? A sales ledger. Invoice rounding, additional accounting, additional fee, right? Interest, do we need to charge interest on the customer because they paid late? It's got nothing to do with what's on the invoice. It's got all to do with the entry in my sales ledger. Therefore, specific. And so you can see now, domestic, EU, and foreign, that doesn't really work. In most cases, if you need more than one customer posting group, you only need trade and intercompany. And that's it, right? Because again, it's about the link between the two. So this is really about the first part. So posting setup, posting groups, and how they actually work. Let's go back to the posting setup now, because you can see general. Now, if you open the general posting setup, and as I showed you before, we have the everything, right? Domestic, EU, and export, and the combination of product. And we have sales, we have purchases, and then the last part is about inventory, and then we have variance, and then lastly, the new accounts introduced by the subscription module and revenue recognition. Very sophisticated, rather complex new module in Business Central. Does a ton of stuff. I think we should have a dedicated training session for that, because it's so complex. It can be. It requires a couple of hours. So the next part of the setup also applies to direct cost applied, inventory adjustments, because again, this general product posting groups affect pretty much physical items. And so if I look at an item now, you will see the same structure. Let me open my faithful others desk. We use it all the time for training and testing purposes. And now if I scroll down into my cost and posting, we can see general product posting group is retail, and inventory posting group is, again, resale. Again, this is where Kronos gets a bit complicated. Resale, finished goods and raw material, and general product posting group, you can see no tax, with tax, which is, again, it's a bit misleading. Again, but taxes probably require a separate conversation. So whenever we then create a transaction now, the system needs to know where to post. And that's why if I end up with a combination that doesn't exist in Business Central, and if I try to create an invoice with a combination, for example, domestic retail, right? And if I don't have domestic retail on sales, now if I create an invoice for a customer set up with domestic and an item which is tagged with retail, and I try to post the invoice, Business Central will give me an error because sales account cannot be blank for this combination. And this is how the system ensures that you never get your subledgers and your general ledgers out of sync, unless, of course, we use some custom development or trying to change things on the fly. And so as we work, and then we end up creating some issues. But really, most of the time, it's just about bad data, about missing configuration, and you're stuck. And against each posted sales invoice, you can see posted sales invoice now, we can actually track down what happens in the system. So this is a list of actual invoices. And so without opening the document, this is a very welcome new, well, it's not very new, it's been on for a number of years, but I like it that Microsoft decided to have this fact box here. It's very helpful. You can see this invoice has been posted, and therefore, based on the combination of both general and specific posting groups, customer posting group, general business posting group, general product posting group, inventory posting group, taxes also. You see, Business Central created all these entries, and you can see the entries pointing to my general ledger here. Of course, these entries were not part of the invoice line, and the invoice line, we actually have a physical item. So one invoice, one customer, one item, again, find entries. The system will start counting all the records, and here we are, 5 general ledger, all created automatically by the system by taking into account the general posting group, domestic, general product posting group, sale. The rest is determined by the specific posting group, because we have here taxes, you can see, and this one is accounts receivable, which is linked to the customer posting group. So this is how can be quite complex, but the good thing is that once you set up and you set up right, you don't really need to worry about it, okay, ever again. So what happens now if this is a limitation? Okay, if you tell me, well, I want more things. So I want more data for my financial reportings, business posting group, item posting group, general product posting group, inventory posting group are not enough. And sometimes you want to use a general ledger, but you want to use more stuff in your system. Well, this is where we have the dimensions. And so against each document, I will have a set of dimensions. This is important to understand. And I'm going to share something with you now today, which is part of the MB800. This is the official Microsoft certification. I do it all the time because I teach consultants. The MB800, they get certified, and it's my bread and butter. It's not just for consultants or users who want to get certified. The MB800 is really powerful. It's really valuable as a certification because it tells you things that you don't often notice. Here we have four dimensions, right? We are customer group, department, salesperson. We have a dimension value and the name. So 70, it's American North, right? Customer group is a medium one. And we also have the salesperson as a dimension. These dimensions work together to create a unique dimension, a set ID. We don't see it on the page. We see it if we drill down in Business Central using the page inspection. And now if I check dimension set ID number 9, this number tells you nothing. And this is why you don't really want to use dimensions as a filter using on your spreadsheets, because in addition to the first two, sales and medium, we'll see in a moment what they mean, the other 4 dimensions and their value are stored in a dimension set ID. This is why dimensions are not filters. This is also part of the exam. Dimensions are filter only and only for 2 dimensions. Let me go back and let me find it for you. It's on the general ledger setup. Dimensions are not filtered with the exception of the 2 global. The 2 global all department and customer group. That's why on that invoice I have sales and medium, because the department is pointed to sales and the customer group is pointed to the other dimension. With the exception of these 2, we can actually see here, I can add more dimensions, but still they will not work as filters because the dimension department is linked to 1 dimension code, right? But I have many more here. So how does it work then? If dimensions are not filters, right? How do I use that? How do you use dimensions to run reports? I've been told that I can use dimension to analyze my financials. That's true, but you don't really need to look at the dimensions here. You want to look at dimension values. How many sales we made for home business group as opposed to industrials, right? Which customer group is responsible for the highest profit? Maybe not more sales, but more profit. These are the questions that you want to ask and you want to answer through dimensions, but not as filters, because I will not find a salesperson dimension filter on my sales invoices. I will not know sales between Jim and Lina using filters in Business Central. So use dimensions were very powerful, but then what you need to do, if you are a consultant, you need to learn how to do this. If you are an end user, learn how to use it, or ask your Microsoft partner, or ask me, and I can help you set it up. You want to use an analysis view. And analysis views are where the number crunching, analysis view, there we go, in Business Central using dimensions work. Here you can see a revenue analysis, and this is from where you want to get your analysis by dimensions. You create this analysis view. This is a very simple. We're talking about the sales revenue. I'm looking at the general ledger accounts between 40,000 and 50,000, which is essentially my income statement. When you can see revenue, costs, right? And it's between these 2. Income only, okay? I can create something more complex, but just for demo purposes. I need to compress by date, and you can see it's updated on posting. You need to enable it on posting, otherwise creating the analysis alone will not work. So every time I post an invoice, Business Central will update this sort of an extra register. And you can see the last entry, 4,283. This is a place where you can have, again, millions of rows. It doesn't matter. The system will work perfectly fine, even if we have tens of millions of rows here. Then you have the dimensions that you can see. I have 4 dimensions that I can use. And notice how the first dimension is not even my global dimension. I can use any dimension that I want or any combination. Once this one is done and is set up, you can see the general ledger is not being updated. And this is where you can see what's working and what's not working. It is a work in progress, right? Then I can filter and I can find analysis by dimension. And this is I can add more filters here. You can see the 4th dimension does not show because I didn't set it up. I want to see the actual amount, budgeted amount. You can do very sophisticated things here. If I click on show metrics now, this is my analysis by dimension. right? Sales of raw material. This is a resale of goods. And so, of course, this is a sandbox with some random data. This is a negative number because it's my income statement, right? And so this is sales of raw material. If I look back here, what we have sales of raw material, this is, you can see the extra ledger or register that I just created. And if I drill down into it, I see the payment on an invoice that has reversed my sales of raw material. Clearly an issue in a Chrome sandbox with the post and setup, as I told you earlier, sometimes it's plain wrong. So don't take it as an example and don't set it up for your customers because you will likely end up with payments ending up reversing your sales of raw material in your income statement. Obviously incorrect. But again, you can see how you can essentially analyze your data here, and you can create all sorts of not really dashboards, reports. You can see sales of service and so on. And here you can actually tell the system that, you know what, I want to have, I want to start filtering by area. And so I want to see the total, America total. Here is where your dimensions are going to work. So now America total, and I'm going to show metrics, and now my numbers should look a bit different, right? And so you can see I can drill down into it, and now you can see the filter on dimension value shows these strange numbers, because Business Central knows there are dimension ID 60s, so dimension value. So the America total, it includes 60, 70, and 80. It can be America South, America North, and so on, Central America, right? So that's how you get the data and your reports to run in Business Central. Now, another question that I get asked, well, we'll get Power BI. Can we get Power BI? Absolutely. Get Power BI to work with your dimensions ID, but it's the same logic, right? I've seen companies using Power BI to fetch data from their analysis view. So this can be the source of your Power BI data. But again, Power BI and Business Central, that's something for something else. Okay, so let's move quickly to month-end tasks, posting, adjustments, and reconciliation. Now, posting adjustments in Business Central are done to general journals. And so I strongly encourage you to look at general journals. You can see general journal templates that we have many. We have assets, we have cash receipt, general intercompany. Again, this is Crohn's data. I've seen organizations using a cash receipt journal template and do their adjustments. Will it work? Yes, it will. Does it help? Does it help the organization segregate work? Probably not. So journals for month-end reconciliation is really a general journal. The others are specific journals, templates that serve a specific purpose. It's the same journal template, but if I open and fix as a general journal, I will see in my journal features and fields that you can see fixed asset balancing account in a fixed asset journal. But if I look, for example, at a payment journal, actually intercompany journal, for example, a payment journal would have been ideal also. Then I see the journal, you can see now I've got additional things. For example, if I scroll right now, I see things like intercompany account number, intercompany account type. It's all the same really, but each individual journal template has got additional features and extended logic that allows you to fetch customer balance, vendor balance, bank accounts, right, and so on. So for accounting purposes, for adjustments and accruals and reconciliation, use the general one, which is the simplest batch, which is designed to do your month end. And there we go. You can see this is a good example of something that we don't often see. There is a monthly general journal entry which is pointing to a dedicated operating balance sheet account, business account. So this is also clearly incorrect, because this seems to be a cash business account operating account. But again, this is the Kronos chart of accounts. It's an asset. Yeah, cash and bank. Again, if you try to do your monthly journal entries and point it to a cash account, you will probably get in trouble. So once again, do not copy the Kronos the setup and try to apply to your customers. You will get it wrong. Also, journals don't or should not be using tax setup, VAT, a journalism adjustment. We need taxes. We need to run through invoices. So with a bit of setup now, what we can do, we can start with a journal. And so a journal in Business Central is something very simple. There is a posting date, a document number. We find an account number, right? And say advance payments for intangible, fixed assets. And we scroll right. We don't need all these tax areas, right? And we have $100 here. And so on the other side of the equation, if you have a advance payment, now what we're going to do, we're going to check the balancing account for this account. And so we do the journal with the credit and debit. Keep in mind that in Business Central, a very clever feature is that you can even do the this part of the journal using one line and then the corresponding here, right? And here you will have the balancing account here, and so a normal journal. Or something I encourage you to look at, if I delete this line, I can stay on one line only, and I can tell the system that the balancing entry, and you can see it's telling me that the document is out of balance because I only put the debit entry here. So I'll see the credit should be to the balancing account, right? And so this is a prepayment balance sheet. I'm going to say, going to find an actual all the prepaid asset and foremost prepaid order prepaid expenses. I put it here, just a random one. There we go. And so now the debit and credit will go to one entry, sorry, one line. And so the preview posting will show me two general ledger entries. And so the debit and credit have been managed automatically, you can see by the system. This one on the first general ledger, the second on the other. And so one line and you get the two. So you will never get essentially them out of balance. And if you had an issue here, you will see it here. Another very interesting feature for your month end and reconciliation is the recurring general journals. Recurring general journals allows you to, you can see it's another journal batch. It's the same template with a specific batch. Okay. And here you can see the recurring method, the recurring frequencies, and there is so much you can do. Your fixed variable, reversing fixed, and you can see the reversing balance. The reversing balance would tell me that every month, right, the recurring frequency at the beginning of the month, right, I will get the journal automatically created for me, and it will just reverse the balance that I find on, I don't know, an accrued income not yet invoiced. Right. And so document number, I need to put a document number here, which is I can use a formula here. I think %4 or something like that, and we'll get it essentially automatically calculated for me. The thing with reversing balance, for example, reversing balance by dimension, is that the system can find the balance in this general ledger accrued income not yet invoiced. And if there is a balance here, it will reverse it automatically. And so now you can do, essentially, you can get the system to prepare your adjustments and accruals automatically for you. You can reverse the accrual because the recurring journal can also have reversing variable, reversing fixed. So every month, reverse it based on a certain amount. Again, probably something that requires a couple of hours to go through because it can be incredibly sophisticated. But you can see once you get the setup right, and once you set your batches right, including your recurring, right, everything will follow through. So common configuration mistakes that cause reconciliation issues. The most common is to let your control accounts open. This is the most common. So what we have here in our inventory. Actually, let's look at a cash. There we go, cash and bank. Actually, let me select this one and let me see what we have on the cash and bank account. There we go, business operating account. Let's look at this business operating account, which is an account enabled for direct posting. So we can post entries using journals in this account. So from a GL, general ledger accounts, there is a very interesting tool of action that I use all the time when I need to audit my client's environment to check if there is something wrong. Where used list tells me where this account is used in terms of posting. And so here I can see exactly what goes wrong. And now if you know Business Central, if you're a finance consultant, if you're like me, you got enough experience, you have configured Business Central for your clients, you can immediately see what's wrong here. And when I do the training for my clients and I show this page, I often stop and say, raise your hand if you can tell me why this is wrong. And so people would usually think for a few minutes, and then usually someone in finance and accounting tells me, well, this general ledger is linked to a bank account. Or this general ledger is used for payments, but actually, I believe it's wrong because it's looking at a bank account posting group. And so, if the bank account posting group of my checking account is linked to a general ledger, which allows direct posting, which means I can post directly into it, how do I ensure that my bank account reconcile? Well, the simple answer is that with this setup, it will not reconcile. Again, third or fourth time I say this, again, you probably hear me say, you'll be tired of me saying it. This is current setup, which is incorrect. And you don't want to use it, and you don't want to copy it for your clients. Here I have my checking bank account with the right balance, and it's linked to the general ledger by a posting group. This is a bank account posting group. This is a specific posting, right? Not general. It's checking. Let me show you. If I remove this checking because I want to trigger an update in the system, and I put it back on. It was checking before, right? We are recording, so you are my witness. This is what happens. The selected bank account posting group is linked to a general ledger account that allows direct posting. The bank account process, the reconciliation might become problematic, which is Microsoft's very polite way to tell you is going to be a pain if the instruction and documentation are not followed. The instruction and the documentation are not followed. You want to know more? If you click yes, you will have the documentation that Microsoft tells you. It's Microsoft documentation that shows you, but you know what? You will get in trouble. You must avoid direct posts. You don't use Gmail accounts that allows direct posting in your bank account posting group. Nice to see it in the bank account posting group, but it's the same for every control account. Cash, accounts receivable, accounts payable, taxes, inventory, all the posting setup and posting groups set up using control accounts must have direct posting disabled. If you allow posting in these accounts, your reconciliation will be a pain, and you will need a ton of spreadsheets and spend days to do something that the system does it automatically for you, and you will never get it wrong. So 2 minutes on the clock. The last topic is how to explain these concepts clearly when training end users. If you're a team leader, a manager, and you use Business Central in the workplace, or if you are a project member of a project team for an organization who's going through a Business Central implementation, chances are you are learning this new system and you must train your end users, your team. Regardless of whether you are an end user, maybe you are a consultant, is your job, like I used to do, and I still do it because I still do consulting sometimes, even though it's more advisory than consulting these days. If you are a consultant and you must train your end users, what I show you today is pretty much what you should do. You might have noticed that I didn't really talk too much about pages, tables, features, fields, right? I started with the general ledger, nominal ledgers, right? I talked about subsidiary ledgers. I talked about the general ledger register, right? General ledger entries, and I mentioned the fact that these general ledger entries are an archive, right? That can grow and contain millions of rows. But again, it doesn't really matter because everything, the backbone of your financial data is managed across different places, right? And I use a structured approach to go from the foundations of the general ledger to the link between the general ledger and the subledgers using posting groups, right? Posting groups, like, general posting setup, there we go. Then I showed how the posting groups link to the general ledger. So I used a structured approach starting from the foundation up until when we ended up creating something more sophisticated, including dimensions, reporting. I didn't teach you how to create your reports. It would have been overwhelming. It would have been too much, right? But I show you the essence. Dimensions are not filters, right? You need to use analysis views. Allow the reposting, yes or no. So really good training in Business Central is about ensuring that you use a terminology that your users are already familiar with. Forget about features for the time being, at least from the beginning. Forget about pages. Use a structured and logical approach, start from the foundation and build on top of it slowly. If this was a half a day training session, we would have gone through and posted a few journals together. We would have created a customer together. We would have almost like month-end reconciliation. I would have showed you how to create a recovery journal. I would have asked you, create a journal for me. Explain to me what you do, right? This is good training. So of course, it's not really a train the trainer, but hopefully by now, this will get you a very good idea, right? So it's already, an hour on the clock, and I'm very grateful that 29 of you still online, which is amazing. Think about it. 100 people signed up. A third showed up for 1 hour, talking about not the most exciting, right, of the topics, but hopefully you got value from this training and you will find it interesting. If you if you have any question, you can send me an email. You should have received the email confirmation. But it's my email address. It's not an automated message. I mean, there is some automation in it, but that is my actual email address. So if you respond to that email, if you send me a link there, you send me a message there using that email, it will go straight into my inbox. And I might not be able to go back to you immediately, but maybe in a couple of working days, I will do my best and I will send you more details. In that email that you will receive with the recording, you will also have the link to book a call with me if you want to discuss advanced training for you and your team. And if you want to book my time, you want to hire me for a day or two and to work with you, or maybe use one of my team members. Again, we can discuss my options for bespoke training if you want. So thank you very much for showing up and staying with me for 1 hour. I'm looking forward to receiving your messages, and keep an eye on my website and on my LinkedIn page, because in a couple of weeks' time, more free training will be available from me, from one of my collaborators, because this company is growing and I'm so looking forward to do even more of these free training sessions. I hope you have a good rest of the day or the evening, depending on where in the world you are, and happy learning. Thank you all. Have a great rest of the day. Thank you. Talk soon. Thanks. Thank you. Recording has stopped.